Hi, my name is Anjani, and today I'm going to read an astrology chart of somebody who is very dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite musicians since I was a little kid, and somebody who I have truly grown and learned so much from. So I have never read an astrology chart of somebody who hasn't asked me, paid me, or that I have asked permission from. And it's a little bit strange for me, but when I ask um, inside of myself, the answer I get is a yes. So I'm going to go ahead and read Prince's chart. So partially my purpose for doing this is number one, I've been crying all day, like it hit so hard. And I love to learn about myself, and through seeing other people who have influenced my life, people who I love, people who I'm interested in. When I'm able to read their chart, I'm able to see a reflection back at me, of the person and of myself. So it's a very transformative process for me. And tonight is full moon in Scorpio, which that was the thing that kicked off my idea of like, wow, I should read his chart. Number one, because Scorpio is the planet of death and rebirth. And when I looked up the information, Prince's rising sign, or, what he was learning about in this lifetime, was in Scorpio. So seal the deal. And I'm going to read the chart now. So here's what his chart looks like. And I am so honored, and I give great gratitude for the ability to be able to read these, number one, and to be able to be holding this chart in my hands today. And before I start, I've already called in sacred space, but I also want to make a point to give thanks for the lineage, for all the ancient cultures who have tracked the time, kept records of the movements of the sky, and given us this wonderful tool. So in the form of astrology that I've been studying lately, we start with the lineage. The lineage describes what a person was already a master of when they were born. So for Prince, he had the Libra job in the Pisces tribe. The Pisces tribe, we were getting that from the moon position, which is in Pisces, and the south node, which is in the 7th house, which is similar energy of Libra. So the Pisces tribe would be the universal love and compassion. Pisces tribe is like the Bodhisattva energy or Mother Teresa type of energy. Universal love, compassion, wanting to heal the world, basically, and in selfless service to spirit for the sake of love and compassion and healing. The Libra tribe is the tribe who is mostly concerned with making sure that all voices are heard and validated. So if this chart was a chart of, say, it's all people at a table or a circle, or just say the whole world, since it's the Pisces moon, this is all planets, all nations, countries. Libra would care that everybody's voice was heard and validated. So this was Prince's lineage. Libra job in the Pisces tribe. The next thing we look at is the new school. So if that was what he was a master of, we next look at what he came to learn about in this lifetime. So this information is something that we'll work on for the rest of our life. We may or may not ever master it, but this is the intention of what we're coming to learn about. And we get this from the North Node house position and what's rising. So interestingly, he's got the North Node and the ascendant in the sign of Scorpio. So the first house is what we'll talk about for the North Node, which is the Aries job in the Scorpio tribe. So the Scorpio tribe is learning about mysticism, shamanism, depth, intensity, sexuality, really drawing the life force energy. So being able to go into the unseen, the underground, the underworld, tapping into the source of power and being able to fully embody that source of energy. That's the Scorpio tribe, learning about the Scorpio tribe. The Aries job in this tribe would say that within that tribe of sorcerers, of aspiring sorcerers, he would have been the one who was fiercely protecting that tribe. So making sure that the tribe was able to do their work in the mysticism and in the sourcing of energy. All right, so I have one of my favorite albums playing, and I just wanted to turn it up a little bit so I could hear it while I'm doing the reading. So Aries' job in the Scorpio tribe, that is describing what he was coming to learn about in this lifetime. So on this part of the chart, we are always going to be learning about, and we're progressing into learning more about this new school. The placement of Jupiter tells us the pathway from the old school to the new school, and he has Jupiter in the 12th house, which is similar energy of Pisces, also one of the most depth, the part of the psyche that is the most deep. And it's also in the sign of Libra, so doing some of those things that were mystical and very deep, and also listening to all sides of the story, validating everybody's voice, would have been the things that would have been helping him to get from his lineage to his new school. So the next thing I'm going to cover is his inner masculine and inner feminine. This has been some of my favorite material in my own evolution and my own journey, and is really what a lot of my work has been focused on as of late. So his inner masculine, we look at Mars, and he has Mars in Aries. Aries is right over there. So Mars is there in the sign of Aries. And for this, I take the Mars and whatever's rising and do alchemy. So to combine the two together to get a good look at the form of the masculine that this man was embodying. So Aries, Mars, and Scorpio rising. So putting the two together, it's similar to what the new school is. Aries job in a Scorpio tribe. It's a similar kind of energy, a little bit different, because this is his inner masculine, the way that he was expressing the God in himself. So protector, fierce protector, very on fire, passionate, and maybe doing before he thought about it. That's a similar a quality of Aries. With Scorpio there, you can see extra fire, extra passion, and just intensity for the inner masculine. For the inner feminine, we look at Venus and what is descending on the chart. So the inner feminine for a male would tell us about the kind of woman that he would most likely be attracted to. And ultimately, this was his own. This was Prince's inner feminine. And he has Venus in Taurus, and his descent is in Taurus also. So I'll just show you that here. Venus in Taurus, and the descent is also in Taurus. So as you can see, this on the outside is the timeline material. The inside is the natal chart. And I'm just noticing this now, that the sun was on the descent. This is the day of his transition. So the day I'm doing this reading, Scorpio, the moon is in Scorpio, the sun is in Taurus, and this is his relationship axis. Who am I? The lesson that he was learning in this lifetime, and who are you? So I actually have this same relationship axis. And what my teacher told me about this was that, ultimately we want to know that who are you is a reflection of who am I. So, and, the Shiva Shakti, becoming this whole thing. Like, you're rising into what you're rising into, and you're owning that, and then the descent, owning that too as yourself, which I think on this day, I am sure that has been a completion for Prince. So, okay, so the relationship axis basically answers the question, why on earth would I ever want to be in a relationship with somebody else? This is about a lover, a partner. It's not about family members. It's like, why would he have ever wanted to be in a relationship with a woman? And this is what the relationship axis answers. So I know I skipped over his Venus. I'm going to get back to that. That's the form of the feminine that he most would have wished to connect with. And he's got Taurus. So I'll talk about that. But this relationship axis is the tantrika, or the one who wants to experience the most amount of pleasure and intensity in the relationship. So whoever he would have been in a relationship with, the relationship itself would have needed to recharge his batteries. This is the type of relationship that's all about intensity, passion, pleasure. The pathway of Tantra. This is the path of Tantra. So now, his inner feminine, Taurus, is all about the pleasure principle. How can I have the most amount of pleasure with the least amount of pain? And so this is the form of the feminine that he would have most likely been interested in. This is a real pleasure goddess. Venus is ruled, or Taurus is ruled by Venus. So Venus and Taurus is the same type of energy. So you get the point. And when you combine, now knowing, like, this was who he was as his inner feminine. And I just get the picture of how much he really did embody that feminine aspect of himself. With all the pretty scarves and the nice hair, like, he always looked so beautiful. And Taurus is all about the beauty that is for its own pleasure. So I'm laughing because, it's a weird kind of beauty, and this is something that I'm working with for myself and from my own chart's perspective, learning that the beauty that it's unique and unusual. And so I appreciate that. The next thing I'm going to cover is the top. So I will call this a four corners reading. I'm going from, the relationship axis, the midheaven, which talks about his contribution to the world, and the home and roots, which talks about, his, what his home would have been like, or what he most would have liked for his home to be like. So for the midheaven, contribution to the world, this tells us, obviously, how would he most want to contribute? His need to contribute to the world is in the sign of Leo. Leo is on center stage, self-loving, radiant. This is royalty. This is, when it's on the midheaven, it shines so bright, not for its own sake, but so that everybody else is also invited to stand and shine. All right, so it's interesting because a lot of times Leo is pushy and bossy, but when it's on the midheaven, it is really saying that it's part of being radiant, shiny and bright, so that others are also able to do the same thing. He also had the midheaven is conjunct exactly with Pluto. Pluto is a planet of an underworld initiation, very similar energy to Scorpio. So this is already a lot of Scorpio that we've noticed in this chart, a lot of that Pluto and Scorpio energy. So Pluto conjunct the midheaven would just say that along with having that on stage presence of being bright and shiny, he's also reaching down into the depths of consciousness, bringing out what was hidden, bringing out the shadow and bringing it to the center stage. A lot of his songs, he talked about sexuality and religion and, things that were not talked about, especially not in the time when I was listening to this music. Another really important feature that I'm noticing right now is that Pluto, which is right conjunct his midheaven, is in opposition to the moon and to Chiron. So Chiron is the wounded healer, the wound that becomes its own medicine. That's what Chiron's about. I'm not going to get too much into that in this reading because I want to cover the four corners, but it needs to be said because this is part of what he was contributing to humanity. So Pluto conjunct Chiron, Pluto in opposition to Chiron would say, I've actually recently read a friend of mine's chart who has Pluto in opposition to Chiron, and it is an intense opposition. It's an intense aspect to have on the chart, saying that they're both underworld planets and they're in opposition. So they're looking directly at each other. And when two planets are in opposition, it's like a full moon. It's similar to a full moon energy. So it really just heightens the intensity of the underworld and bringing the wounds that he had in his own life up into the way that he contributed to the world. So I'm not going to cover too much his personal wounding fracture points, but this can be seen from the chart, and I'm getting a good idea of what that might have been. I'm going to continue on here. So also the moon in opposition to Pluto conjunct the midheaven tells me that his lineage was a humongous part of what he was bringing in as his way of contributing to the world. So we will look back, Libra job in the Pisces tribe, and taking some of that energy, especially the Pisces moon energy of the mystic, universal love and compassion, bringing that up with this underworld planet and bringing that up to share it, shine it, and allow us to also touch that and be able to, when somebody's on stage being that, it sort of allows us and invites us to entrain and get an attunement to that energy. Super powerful. Okay, so that's the midheaven. Then down below on the home and roots, we have Chiron, number 1, in the 4th house. So this tells, well, I guess I am going to talk about this. The 4th house is home, the home life, the family. And Chiron is the wounded healer. So wherever Chiron is on our chart gives us a clue about our fracture point. Everybody has a fracture point. Some of the usual things are betrayal, abandonment, abuse, any of the common, not being good enough. In this particular situation, I'm getting the idea that it had to do with being weird or being like Aquarius energy is sort of very unusual. This is, when there's a flock of birds all flying one way and everybody's supposed to fly that way, Aquarius will like do weird stuff and go the other way and do some other things. So this has given me the clue that perhaps in his home life as a child, he might have not been validated for his uniqueness. And how many of us can relate to that, you know? And then grabbing that stuff and pulling it up and sharing it as a contribution to the world. Super powerful. So the next thing I'm going to talk about here is we have in his current timeline, he was in his third Saturn return. So if you're familiar with a Saturn return, it's basically a time where structure comes. We return to the place where Saturn was on our chart when we were born. That's the technical kind of way of it. But in the sort of metaphysical way of it, it's like getting to come back to a checkpoint with Saturn, who is the governor of the middle world, the rules, the laws, the man-made rules and laws. This is not natural law. Pluto is more in charge of natural law, and he handled his Pluto for sure. He took charge of that in a beautiful way. Saturn is middle world laws, though. And so as you can see, this outer circle is the timeline material of what's happening in the sky right now. The inner circle is his natal chart. And so I'm going to bring that up. You can see Saturn almost exact to, it was within 7 degrees of being exact of a Saturn, third Saturn return. So that pretty monumental, and I wanted to mention that today. Another timeline piece that I'm seeing on here is Chiron, which we've talked about already, is square to his natal sun today. So, and this is also within 7 degrees of being an exact square. So let me show you that on the chart. Chiron is here in our universal, you know, it's in everybody's, you know, this is where Chiron is right now in the sky. And on his chart, there is a square to the sun. So his sun is in Gemini. Oh, I didn't talk about that, so I'll cover that next. But a Chiron square time would be saying that the wound, the initial wounding, would be sort of aggravating. So whenever something is square, it is a sort of, I think of it as decide and take action. So, you know, when the thing is square, it's kind of like irritating and pushing on. And so that something has to happen. A square sort of makes something have to happen. You decide and take action. That's what a square represents from, you know, the way that I'm working it. And so we had that going on today. The other thing, and Vesta's right there also. So we could call this Chiron square to the sun and Vesta. So, you know, looking at wounding. This was part of what was happening in his timeline material for this phase of the life that he was in. Now let's talk about the sun, who is opposing Saturn, which I also have that configuration on my chart. There's so many similarities that I'm seeing on here. I'm really happy I'm able to read this today. There's the sun in Gemini, who is opposing Saturn, the middle world teacher, who he was having a return of Saturn on this day. The sun shows us the fuel that this person burned. The sun is a flair or a style, and this is what he was most known for. I mean, from my perspective, growing up, this is what I saw, which was, I also was picking up a lot of the Aquarius things of being unusual. Gemini is super unusual, and he has his sun in Gemini. So Gemini is a communicator, the trickster. Gemini is the creative muse. So there's a few other artists that are coming up in my mind right now who have their sun in Gemini, and I adore them all. They're amazing people and very unique and different. They will not be the same as anybody else, you know. It's very, very individual, and they're able to express that in their own unique way. So the sun in Gemini shining over the whole chart, having an opposition to Saturn, which is the middle world teacher. This gives me an idea that this person would have, because Saturn isn't, Gemini isn't good friends with Saturn, because Gemini doesn't care about rules. There is no rules for Gemini. And Saturn is all about the rules. So this can be looked at in two ways. One way would be, because anytime there's an opposition, it's a full moon. It brings it out, it brightens it up, makes it huge so that we can't deny that there's a full moon. Saturn opposing Gemini could look like either constant conflict, because there's the one who has no care for the rules and the thing that is the rules coming together, or, could be conflicting each other. Or the thing, the way I would like to look at it is that Saturn is being a teacher. So looking over at the child, Saturn the father, Gemini the child, the son, the creative son. And I'm saying son, S-O-N. And Saturn being the father. And having them to be able to look at each other, and Saturn being a loving teacher and guiding that Gemini S-O-N, the Gemini sun, and giving a teaching and, disciplining when it needed to, and also giving encouragement and, being a good teacher. So I'm going to end here. Thank you so much for watching my interpretation of Prince from the astrology perspective. So there's his chart one more time. Lots of notes I took on here, of course. I just read what I felt like reading and what was calling out to me. So thank you so much again. Rest in peace, Prince.